Hello, this is Gary Auden. I'm bringing you an EDUcast, the return on investment on Network Edge Orchestration. With me today is Brian Gregory, Director of Product Marketing at Edgewater Networks. And as we always do, we discuss what we're going to discuss. Most of you aren't sure what Network Edge Orchestration is. We're going to cover that. But there are also challenges. And part of the challenges are dealing with session border controllers. There are problems that this addresses, network edge optimization. We're going to discuss the customer journey with NEO, customer problems, and finally get into the ROI. So let's start off with the first slide. Brian, what is network edge orchestration and what does it mean to our audience?
Well, I apologize for the tongue twister, but I think it's really descriptive of what, kind of the enterprise session border controller product segment has kind of become. I mean, we've been in this game a long time, and very early on, it was a lot about the actual physical hardware on site and it driving quality and security. And those devices obviously still do that, but I think what's sort of morphed into this marketplace app over the last 3 to 5 years is this idea of the integration of an edge device with a cloud-based controller to better give you sort of your eyes and ears into your network, help you solve problems faster, help you get to root cause, and kind of keep that customer happy and turned up and successful. So, our two main products in Edge Orchestration, one is EdgeView, our cloud-based platform, and EdgeMark, which is the physical device. And as we go through today, we're going to talk a little bit about those and what they do. So we'll skip the bullets for now and we'll talk to them later. How's that sound?
That's fine. Let's move on to this. I thought it was interesting you conducted a survey dealing with customer support problems and telephony. What were the results of that survey?
Yes, we at Edgewater love customer surveys. We do them all the time and on all sorts of different topics. And this one was really trying to get at what is going on with, first off, we targeted service providers, VARs, master MSPs, folks like that are out selling and selling solutions like hosted EDUcast and chunking and products like that. And we really wanted to understand, what kind of problems are you running into? How often do you run into them? And then how are you solving those problems? So that's kind of the gist of what we did the research on.
We're moving on to the next screen, which is about a number of these challenges. There are a number of challenges here. Would you point out the ones that are most difficult to overcome?
Well, Gary, I thought it was interesting when these numbers came back that poor service quality is at the bottom of the list here. And I guess I kind of look at that as maybe sort of ongoing problems where, you kind of have this recurring issue of, voice kind of going in and out. That seems to be less of a problem today for customers deploying VoIP services. It's really more of that those sort of one-time transactions where you can't get to the information you're looking to get at to help solve an issue, like something goes out or there's a failure or all of a sudden there's some poor voice quality. How do I solve that? And that's where that sort of lack of customer insights and sort of lack of that toolbox, that solution set toolbox, service providers really struggle with. They just don't have the tools they need to help solve those customer issues. And that leads down the path of, well, probably the next slide we're going to talk about here in a second.
So the next slide goes into the challenges, but how does all of these challenges affect the business of both the provider and for the customers?
Well, two big things. One is obviously these are all revenue bearing. Well, I should say revenue bearing. The customer churn is obviously revenue bearing, but the cost bearing elements of long resolution times, high volume of support calls, high operational costs for deployment. These are all very expensive things, and the more that you can improve these, the more customers you can turn up, the more money goes to the bottom line, the happier customer is, and that customer happiness, as it goes through that entire customer relationship, continues on. And as that customer is happier, he's more apt to re-sign with you at the end of your contract term. So it's sort of this positive reinforcement cycle, if you will. The more you can continue to make that customer happy and allay those problem issues as you go along through the customer journey.
On the next slide, we're talking about the Enterprise Session Border Controller. What's its value for voice service deployments, and how is it used?
Good question. The first thing here is interesting. One of the things we asked is, are you using an eSBC? And you can see the majority of people are not using an eSBC, and you can see why they choose not to. Most don't see the benefits, and that's really what our salespeople and customers, prospective customers, I should say, tell us, is that, and a lot of people ask us, well, who do you compete against? Well, a lot of times our sales folks say, we compete against nothing. We compete against the customer deciding not to do anything, as opposed to looking at deploying an SBC. So it's really about, what value an SBC can bring to the table. And Gary, I'd put it in kind of 4 broad categories. The first is that security, right? It is a purpose-built device, purpose-built firewall for SIP security, and it works really in tandem with a firewall, not in replacement of a firewall. They really need to work. They both do different things, and they are accomplishing different things. And if you think about some of the security elements that an eSBC can bring to the table, hiding the customer topology from the world, preventing DDoS attacks, helping cut down on toll fraud, all those kind of elements that not only help you as a service provider, but help your customer as well. The second thing is quality of service, and this has become a little less critical, just in that pipes and last mile circuits have gotten so fully developed. We've left the days of DSL and T1s. So doing a lot of active management of QoS is still still there, but it's maybe a lot less critical as it once was. Where we're seeing the transition with QoS is multiple WAN connections. This whole idea of SD-WAN, which we're not going to talk a lot about today, but the idea of SD-WAN and moving calls between WAN connections, and then also looking at those layer 7 mission critical kind of traffic, like we're on a WebEx today. That would be a layer 7 traffic where you might want to prioritize that over something else. The third thing is remote troubleshooting. So that EdgeMark device, that SBC out on the customer site, is way out on your network. It gives you the best chance of understanding what's going on the customer site, gathering that information, and getting to problem resolution. So that idea of having that network probe out there on the far edge of your network is incredibly valuable. And then the fourth thing is really, as you think about service normalization and deploying services like SIP trunking, where you have an IP PBX and you want to normalize that IP PBX signaling between your network and that device. Well, the back-to-back user agent of an eSBC can really step in and manage those transactions and make sure you can easily deploy a SIP trunking service and have the SBC do a lot of the heavy lifting in making that happen.
Go a little further into how orchestration can help us. You've mentioned some of these, others you haven't mentioned.
Yes, my favorite subject is return on investment and total cost of ownership. And really, this is really getting down to, as you think about the cost of an SBC, the cost of a service like EdgeView, the Edge Orchestration, there's a clear cost there. And the idea here is, yes, you make that investment in your product in that tool set, but does it really does it have a positive ROI at the end of the day when you add up all the costs? And that's what we're going to go through here, Gary, in the next several slides.
So let's start that with the customer journey.
Yeah, so this is just a really good way to think about the customer lifecycle. And just anecdotally, I used to work for a service provider several years ago that really battled churn and poor customer care, and that poor customer care led to a lot of customer churn. And we as an organization spend a lot of time thinking about all these customer transactions and how we can affect them on an ongoing basis. And it's really important that the ability to solve a customer issue in a single phone call, or expeditiously figure out an issue and get it to completion to the customer satisfaction. All of that pays dividends as you go downstream. So as you think about the idea of you're delivering business grade VoIP services, you have an installation phase where you want to efficiently go in there, install, make yourself look very professional. You want to instill confidence in yourself as that service provider. Early life, we're going to talk about, absolutely critical. Ongoing support is that idea of ongoing customer care and how you can minimize calls and truck rolls if the customer issues happen. And then renewals, when that end of contract happens, how you can make sure that that customer wants to re-sign with you, that they're happy, and they're enthused to keep moving on with you. So, Gary, let's go through these in a little greater depth. I have a slide on each one of these 4 little parallelograms.
Yeah, this is the one you were talking about earlier, is installation. Let's go through that.
Yeah, so installation, like I said earlier, I mean, a lot of times installations will go smooth until they don't. And then you're kind of at a loss to figure out what's going on. So, we kind of think about, as we think about installs, and if it goes well and the customer and it's done well and the customer's happy, they generally kind of move through this sort of happiness plane where they're kind of good through their customer journey. But then you have these ones that kind of start off on the wrong foot. You can't figure out the problem. You maybe got it right, and then that leads to further problems downstream because maybe something didn't happen right. That's where you get into these poor customer situations where you may not be able to solve the problem, and they may actually end up churning from you. So just having that device on site, that intelligent edge device, which is our Edgemark device, or an enterprise session border controller, really gives you that tool set on site. You can make test calls, you can look at the LAN, you can use the SD card for emergency handset installations if need be. The idea is to quickly get that customer turned up, confidently instill confidence. And we've as we've kind of got these numbers in front of customers, customers told us having an Edgemark out on site probably saves us 15, 20, 30% over not having a device, just in the tool set that it gives them when they're out there on that sort of complex business installation.
What are customer problems, and how do they relate to troubleshooting and the time and cost expended?
Oh my gosh, this was kind of a jaw dropper when we did our survey here, and we kind of asked customers, for all your newly acquired customers, how often are you running into problems? And my gosh, nearly 40% said that they had significant problems, and I'd say over, above 10%. And I would say probably even, 5 to 10% of the, I wish I would have got a little more granularity in this, but so, my interpretation of this data is 40% of the time, 4 in 10 times, you're having a significant problem with customer turnup that maybe results in a second truck roll, or extensive troubleshooting, or potentially a churn because you could just never get that customer up and running to their satisfaction.
One of the points I thought was important about this slide is you're talking about the early part of the customer's life.
Exactly, Gary, and this, anecdotally, we spoke to a number of customers that are in the OTT space, that are exclusively delivering voice services over the top of somebody else's network, and some of them have told us that they experience 5 to 10% early life churn, meaning of every customer acquired, brought in the door, all that marketing expense, send phone out to the customer, almost, in some of these cases, 10% of the time. That customer will leave. And if you think about the cost, the future revenue of that particular customer, I mean, if they're spending $300-400 a month on a 36-month contract, well, that's $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 over that customer life that's lost because you couldn't solve that problem. So, this is such a huge economic element in how you have to manage your product, where you have to satisfy that customer up front and get them to full operation. And if you can't, there's a massive cost detriment if you can't make that happen.
Now this then means that we're going to be dealing with ongoing support as well beyond the installation. What do we need to talk about here?
Right. And this is where you kind of got them to steady state. An issue comes up, and then how you solve that problem. And as much as you can solve that problem in a single phone call, the better. In fact, as much as you can use the tools that in many cases customers see a problem before a customer does and is able to fix the problem, and the customer is none the wiser. So you're actually eliminating a trouble call, and certainly the truck roll that is probably a $500 expense to go out to a customer site at a minimum. I've even heard as high as $1,500. As much as you can eliminate those, even a small percentage, even if you can eliminate your truck rolls by 10%, that's a gigantic number to the bottom line. So that's the idea of using having those tools at your fingertip, that edge orchestration tools at your fingertip to really help solve these problems and cut them off at the pass.
We bring up the word churn, and what is churn as applied here, and how does churn affect the orchestration?
Sure, and churn here is really, maybe churn's a misnomer in this particular slide, and then the churn is basically someone that's leaving you at some point in your customer relationship. In most, and that's certainly big in sort of the mobile phone business. In sort of the business VoIP provider, a lot of times you get them to that 36-month point in time. So they're end of their contract, and you want them to sign a new contract with you. Well, that opens up them looking at other vendors, or considering other options. And obviously you want to minimize that as much as possible. And as much as you can, if you've successfully navigated through that customer process where you've had a good installation, you've managed problems appropriately, you've created that positive customer environment, they're absolutely more likely to stay with you ongoing, even if and obviously there's other factors here, price and competition and things like that. But as much as you can control here that customer experience and having a positive customer experience, it's absolutely going to affect that churn as you get to that renewal point at month 24, 36, or what have you.
Now we finally get to the question of the return on investment. And I thought it was interesting how many different elements you think there are important here.
Yeah, and we built up this analysis, and we shared it with a number of customers to validate it, and they certainly agreed with a lot of the findings. And you think about the orange bars here on the left-hand side, they're really talking about savings associated with various cost elements. You think about truck rolls, and if you can cut your truck rolls down by 10% over a 36-month period, and by the way, these numbers are on a per customer basis. So that $101 is representative of a single customer's economic benefit. Sort of multiplied across sort of a cost divided by number of customers, if you will. So as you think about installation and truck rolls and customer care, and certainly churn avoidance. So if you can move your churn number by even a small amount, there are massive dividends on a per customer basis. And then you go to the right-hand side where you have the cost of a device, you have a cost of the service offering, and we have a service called Cloud Edge, which I'll provide a flyover here in a few slides. But it really it's really the net effect here is there is most definitely a positive customer economic benefit when you factor in all the things where you can save money or add revenue into the picture.
Would you provide some company background for us?
Well, absolutely. So we were very, very early into the voice over IP space. We have been around since 2002. So and we actually were considered #1 market share in North America by a number of analysts that cover our marketplace. We've sold over 600,000 edges. And we have 20 million connected endpoints, meaning IP phones. So we've been in this product in this market for a long time, and it's really our exclusive domain. We are singularly focused on edge orchestration, on enterprise session border controls, on cloud-based management. It is our central part of our product portfolio, and this is where we have made many happy customers and continue to drive revenue going forward.
That gets me into this question. What's Cloud to Edge Complete?
So Cloud to Edge Complete is a new way of buying our services. And basically what we decided to do is take all the things we offer in Network Edge Orchestration and bundle them up into a monthly service fee as opposed to a perpetual software purchase. And what's great here is, we've reduced the price of hardware, in some cases by 50 to 75%. You pay a monthly service fee. The monthly service fee is completely independent of size of customer. So as you put an edge mark out on a customer site, if it's 5 home phones, if it's 500 phones, you pay the same price. So it's a very predictable cost. It's really, you get all the tools, all the support, all included in a very easy to understand monthly service fee. And it's really, most of our customers are starting to move this direction and getting away from making more capital-oriented purchases for services.
I'd like to point out to those in the audience that there's contact information here in the Americas and also in Europe, Middle East. And I'd like to thank Brian for this very informative EDUcast. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Gary. Appreciate it.